Well, good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm Lee Love. I'm the host here of Photo Mentor TV, and I'm glad you're here with me, whether you're joining live or on the replay. We do this every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and always have a good time. At least I do. I hope you guys do too. Anyway, thanks again for joining us. Got a good show again tonight. A lot of fun. This is the trivia, the photo trivia or photo question quiz that we do. I'm trying to do this. Let's see. I guess on the third Friday of the night, maybe a third Friday of the month, and it's just been a lot of fun and a lot of work, of course, but it's a lot of fun. So I think you guys will enjoy it. Let's see. Got a couple of things I want to mention here before we get started. The first thing is I really, really want to thank a few people. Ali Nova, Carl Brown, Lori, and Tang. I really appreciate you guys a lot. I want to thank you for that. You guys know why. And I just know we're going to have a lot of fun, and I'm excited about it. So thanks very much. And I appreciate your support and your belief and your so anyway, I think it's gonna be great. I think you guys are gonna enjoy it. So anyway, I want to thank you guys a lot for that. Allie, Carl, Lori, and Tang. Thanks again. Let's see what else. Again, we do just kind of remind you guys. We do the photo reviews every the first Friday of the month. So if you're interested in submitting your work to get a couple of images reviewed, please do that. Go to review.photomentor.tv. Definitely something that's beneficial to you, and I think that that you will get a lot of enjoyment out of it. I know a lot of other people do as well, and even though if you don't think your work's that great, it's okay. That's why we do it anonymously. But I see a lot of work out there, and I know other photographers will benefit from seeing your work, whether it be good or bad, or whether it needs improvement or not. That's the whole idea. We're all started at zero. We're all in this together, and nobody's got this down 100%. Believe me. So even as long as I've been doing this. So anyway, okay. So I think that's about it. I want to thank. Kenda's here. Thank you, Kenda. Greetings and salutations. Yes, you too. And I tell you, it's Kenda's just an incredible singer. She sent me a couple of songs, and I'm just so blessed to have her send that to me. Just amazing, talented person. I don't know how she does it. It's something that I've never been able to accomplish of any kind of musical instrument or singing. And so anyway, and also want to thank Dean here. Hey Dean, how you doing, buddy? Dean's a regular, and I appreciate you guys showing up and learning, but also asking me questions and making sure I'm on track for the kind of stuff you guys want to know. So anyway, and also, of course. Hello to Sue Ann. Happy Friday, she says. So thanks very much. You're absolutely welcome. Well deserved, I might add. Beautiful, beautiful voice. Okay, so again tonight we're going to do photo trivia. We'll go ahead and jump right into that here, and might as well get started. So I think you guys will have a good time. Let's see if I got this right now. So the first. The first question tonight is, which company introduced the flexible film to the market? Who was it? Was it Fujifilm Corporation, Kodak, BB, C, Agfa, or D, Leica, which I misspelled Leica, I just realized. Sorry about that. And so if you guys want to put your responses either in Facebook or YouTube, just put the letter, and we'll look at that and see how close you've come and to that subject. 30 seconds to see if you guys get that right. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm definitely gonna put a clock sound and some kind of buzzer on this thing. So Sue Ann says B. Anybody else have a guess? Come on, guys, you guys much have a guess. A, B, C, or D. And no looking it up. Okay, so the answer, just guessing Kodak. Well before my time, Allie. Hey, I think this is well before everybody's time, Allie. Believe me. So the answer on this one is it is Kodak, and it was done in 1884. So, like I said, this is well ahead of any of our probably our parents too, or grandparents maybe. And he developed this in 1884. What a difference! I mean, that made for the industry. Think about it, because before they were using sheet film, and so with sheet film, you had to load one at a time. It was difficult to deal with, and you have these big bulky holders that you had to put them in. And so this really kind of revolutionized the photo industry. And it's interesting, not to get off on a tangent here, but I was having a discussion on on a group about, the article was about, if the mirrorless camera is the future, then that means the smartphone is really the camera of the future. And of course, a lot of the comments, people are like, it's ridiculous. You'll never be able to do what a camera can do, and you can't duplicate a 400 millimeter lens and all this kind of stuff. But my point was that industry is going to change, that the iPhone or the smartphone is really, really getting more and more capability. And I think that we're at a point where our industry is approaching, not our industry, but a lot of industries have reached a point where I call it good enough. I've seen it happen in the audio industry. I've seen it happen in telecommunications industry, the photography industry, where the quality doesn't have to be 550 megapixels in super sharp resolution, that the images are good enough based on the delivery mechanism. Look at TV, for example. Most people don't realize that TV is compressed. If you look at a really super high definition image that's uncompressed, the quality is very, very different, like a Blu-ray, for example. So, but guess what? People aren't buying Blu-rays. They're happy doing Netflix, even though the quality's not as good. So anyway, interesting. So I think that my point here is that, that this definitely changed the industry and revolutionized the industry, just like a lot of other things are doing. And where's Tony at, Sue Ann? Where's he answering from? I didn't see his answer. So anyway, okay, let's do the next one here. The next one is, which scientist discovered white light was composed of multiple colors? Now, I promise we're going to get a lot easier here. They're not all history. I did some fairly easy ones tonight, and this may not be one of them. So A, Isaac Newton, B, Albert Einstein, C, Thomas Edison, or D, Baron Kelvin. And if you might remember from last week, Kelvin was the gentleman that figured out color temperature of light, which we have a couple of questions on that. But anyway, so Isaac Newton, A, B, Albert Einstein, C, Thomas Edison, or D, Baron Kelvin. So Tony says C. That would be a good guess, Tony. I'm a big fan of Thomas Edison. He was one of my heroes growing up, and he did have a lot of inventions, a phonograph and some others. So anybody, A, B, C, or D? Anybody other guess? I guess I forgot to start the timer. Sorry about that. Dean says C as well. Kenda says B. Okay, anybody else? All right, I'll give you the answer. And the answer is Isaac Newton, believe it or not. And it happened in like 1666 or 1667. Apparently, he was pretty avid photographer or took an interest in photography, and he would punch a hole. He put a hole in his wall, and the light would come through, and he would shine it through a prism. And he discovered that the white light was made up of multiple colors of light. Up to that point, by the way, they thought that white light was contaminated, that it was just white, it was pure white, and it was contaminated with other colors. But he's the one that actually discovered that it contained all of them. And we're going to talk about this in a minute on a little bit different subject. I'll try and remember to bring this up. So the answer then would be A. So answer's A on that on question number 2. Sorry about that, guys. It's a little bit of a trick question. I threw Thomas Edison in there because I thought maybe somebody would pick that, or Albert Einstein. Are both pretty smart folks, and most people knew Thomas Edison's name more so than Isaac Newton. And of course, it was a little bit far back. 1666 is a little different than, you know, what, the 1800s when Thomas Edison was inventing light and stuff like that. I think he invented the projector, if I'm not mistaken, as well. That's Thomas Edison. I know he did the movie camera. He had some involvement in the movie camera. So, had a big development in Hollywood. So, anyway, sorry about that. Didn't mean to trick you guys, but that was the... Okay. So, the next one is... Now, this one is a real photography question. So, think about this one for a second. So, what are the settings that give the same exposure as 1/200th of a second at f8? So, in other words, you can change the settings, but the exposure would be the same on one of these options. Or D, none of the above. So, it'd be A. If you shot at 1/60th of a second at 2.8, would that give you the same exposure? Or would B, 500th of a second at f8, would that give you the same exposure, same amount of light? C, 1/25th of a second at f16, or D, none of these. It's just A, 1/60th at 2.8, B, this is you, Allie. Okay. So, yeah, B, 1/500th of a second at f8, 1/25th at f16, or D, none of the above. Okay, so Ken does the first, Allie's coming in at C, and Kenda's coming in at C. Those are good guesses. Let's see how accurate you are. And how much time we have left on the timer? 11 seconds. So A, B, C, or D. What do you guys think? All right, so the answer, any other answers coming in? Hey, Junaid, nice to see you, buddy. Junaid says C, and Dean says D. All right, the answer is, it is C. Okay, so it would be the same. 1/25th at f16 is the same as 1/250th at f8. Now here, let's think about the way this works. And I'll be honest with you guys, I have to think about it as I'm doing this. I know the answer, but sometimes it throws me. I'm like, okay, wait, one stop up, down. Okay, so here's what's going on. So if your exposure is 1/250th of a second at f8, and that's the proper exposure, by changing the shutter speed to 1/25th of a second, you're basically letting in twice the amount of light. You've taken the shutter speed and you've cut it in half, or you've slowed it down in half, and therefore you're getting twice the amount of light. So to compensate, you have to change the aperture to f16. So you double the aperture and open the shutter speed as twice as long. Now you could have done it the other way. You could have done, you could have also gone to 1/60th of a second at f22, or actually f32. But so it doubles every time. So if you open it one stop, one of the options, f8 or the aperture or the shutter speed, you have to compensate the other direction, and that's really what happened here. So this is why, by the way, shooting on manual is a problem if you're not don't have this down pat, because if you don't realize this and you change, oh, I need a faster shutter speed or a slower shutter speed, then what happens is you change one of the settings, but you don't change the other one, and now your images are going to be underexposed or overexposed. I see it all the time, and that's why I'm a big proponent of teaching people to shoot on aperture priority. So if you think about it this way, if you shoot on aperture priority and you're on f16 or f8, let's say, the camera will then automatically pick the right aperture or shutter speed. But if I change the aperture, let's say I go from f8 to f16, the camera will know that and go, oh, I have to open up slow the shutter speed down, and it'll automatically go from 1/25th or 2/50th to 1/25th of a second. So you're picking one of those options, and let the camera's picking the other one. So that's one reason, and that, especially when you're learning. Now, when you get better at this, you can shoot on manual if you want, if it's necessary, if you don't want the light to change at all. But you have to remember that when you change one, you also have to change the other, and it has to be the equal amount, assuming you want the same exposure. So, and yes, you're right, Dean. I mean, it would make sense, right? It's just but it's confusing. It really is confusing. Believe me, I get it. It's sometimes, it throws you, like, okay, I got to figure out which direction, because I could have put in I could have kept it. I could have said 1/500th of a second at f4, which would have been actually the same thing. That would have been the same number. I could have given you more than one answer, but I was trying to make it a little bit simple here. This is supposed to be a teaching moment, not a gamemanship. Let's see who we can stump the audience kind of thing. So anyway, that's the reason for that. All right, so let's go to the next one. So the next one is, all right, which of these is not a feature found on a camera lens? So when you're looking at an adjustment or something kind of an adjustment on a lens, or f-stops would be A, B, autofocus, C, stabilization, or D, ISO. Which of those would not be a setting that you would change on the lens? Okay. So let's see. So we've got about 15 seconds there. F stops, B autofocus, C stabilization, D ISO. Which of those would not be something that you would see on the lens? Okay. And we've got a number of people that have said, Tony says D, Junaid says D, Ali says D, Kenda says D. I can't trick you on this one, can I, guys? Okay, good. All right. So, yes, you're correct. So that the ISO would be something you would adjust for the camera sensor or the sensitivity of the camera, which would affect the image, but that's not something that's part of the lens. So the lens is going to have your autofocus elements, your stabilization, although there is some in-body stabilization, of course, on mirrorless cameras now, but still, even mirrorless cameras have lenses that have image stabilization built into them as well. So you've got aperture, focusing, and stabilization would definitely be things in the lens. See, you got it. You guys are getting it now. All right. So, all right. So let's do another one here. Okay. Which of the following color spaces is not used by digital cameras? So this, if you remember, probably don't remember if you guys have watched. The sensor, I think it was last time we did this, talked about the Bayer filter and how a sensor worked. So there would be an A, it would be an sRGB color space. A B would be ProPhotos RGB color space. C, CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Or RGB, red, green, blue. Which of those is not used by a digital camera sensor? So Allie says B. Judy, hi Judy, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Judy says B. Anybody else? Boom, boom, boom. A few more seconds here. Doon, 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 doon. All right. All right. So the answer on this one, unfortunately, is C. And here's why. So if you look at color space is the values that can be seen both made up of saturation, hue, and saturation. So CMYK is a color space. It's a valid color space, but it's not you. And here's the trick part of this is the digital camera sensor. It's not really, it's not used by a digital camera. It is a printing function. And it's also where what happens in a camera, they use additive color spaces. So RGB is used, if you add red, green, and blue together, you get white. Well, in CYMK, it's the opposite. It's a subtractive color model. And that's only really used in printing, offset printing for the most part. Even digital printers now, like your Canon and Epson printers and HP printers, they don't use CMYK. They also use RGB. So CMYK is a color space that's used for printing, but it's only when it's used for ink systems where they lay ink. Like they'll run through with one color, then they'll bring it and they'll run it through again. They'll line it up, run it through again with another color, and that's how CMYK works. So, but it's a good one. I mean, that's the whole idea, right? And if you also look here, something that's kind of interesting. Now, I should mention that this graphic that I found does not mention ProPhoto, but that is it. Now, this is not the same ProPhoto that does lighting. So that's spelled PROPHOTO. This is ProPhoto RGB color space. But if you look at what's interesting about this, that's the same thing they have up there called wide gamut RGB. They don't call it ProPhoto, but that's what it is. And that's one of the highest numbers of amount of colors you can get out of a camera sensor or out of a color gamut. And so most of the time, some of the higher end cameras, I think my Nikon D850 shoots in ProPhoto, which is usually what I shoot. If you're not shooting that, then you want to be shooting in Adobe RGB, assuming you're shooting in RAW, because that's going to give you the amount of colors and the higher saturation. And then from there, when you convert it down to post online, you would typically convert it to sRGB, but you want your negative or your capture to be at the highest color space possible, number of colors and saturation. So you want to normally shoot, if you're shooting RAW, you want to shoot Adobe RGB or ProPhoto RGB. So anyway, good guesses, guys. All right, so the next one. All right, when shooting film, this may be, as you guys, I don't know how many of you guys have shot films. This could be a little bit of a tricky question. When shooting film, when would you use an 80A filter? It's a very common filter when we're shooting film. It'd be A, to reduce haze. B, convert from 32 to 5500, 3200, 5500. C, as an ND filter to reduce the amount of light, normally like when you're slowing to shut her down. So I know you guys have seen. Or it balances fluorescent light. So A, reduce haze. B, convert from 3200 to 5500. C, ND filter to reduce light. Or D, balances fluorescent light. Now, if you guys don't get this one, it's okay. I get it. I mean, again, not many people who shot film. And when you did shoot film, this was filter most people didn't use a lot. So, fair enough, Allie. No clue. And that's cool. That's a fair answer. So, okay. Guys that's all right. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. So that's why we're here, right? This is a learning experience. That's the whole point of doing this. So, Judy says D, which is a good guess. Dean says D. And, okay, so the answer is B, to convert 3200 to 5500. So what happens is this, is when it was actually, so remember now, for those of you that got bought film or remember film or even have looked at it, when you buy film, you buy it in a certain color temperature. So there's indoor film and outdoor film. Indoor film usually was a little bit higher ISO or ASA as they called it, but it was typically balanced for tungsten light, 3200 degree Kelvin. Daylight film was usually ASA 100 or 200, could be 400, but it was balanced for daylight color temperature. So what happened is if you use daylight film indoors where you have tungsten light bulbs that are cool, that are a 3200 degree temperature, which are, you had to convert you can't, nowadays we just change the color temperature on our camera, right, from tungsten to whatever, but you couldn't do that with film. So what this filter did, what an ADA filter did, is it converted the light that came into the camera from daylight to tungsten. So you could shoot under those conditions if you're shooting under tungsten. So, well, good, Junaid. I'm glad that, yeah, you're gonna get one. You're gonna get one, Judy. So, Judy says she's gonna get one of these. And again, if you're shooting film, yeah, it'd be really handy because, like I said, you're gonna buy film for one or the other. And there's another filter that uses to change it the other way around. And Junaid says that they learn something new every day. Cool. That's good. Thank you, Junaid. I'm glad you said that because that's the whole point of doing this. So sorry, Tony wants to buy a vowel. Okay, so we have A and C. You can buy those two, Tony, if you want those. So that's funny. You guys are great. I love that. Okay. All right. So it's $50 to buy a vowel. You can do it via PayPal if you want. That'll help. Okay. All right. Let's see what the next one is. Let's do the next one here. Okay, now this one may be a little bit harder for you guys too because if you're not used to doing a lot of lighting or you've never worked in theater stuff, you might not know. But what's the purpose of a cucurorius, or what's called a cookie? It's A, to create shadows. B, to feed the crew. C, reduce the amount of light. Or D, it spreads the light over a larger area. So A, create shadows. B, feed the crew. C, reduce the amount of light coming out of the fixture. Or D, spread light over a larger area. And Judy says B. Okay. Oh, I see. She's funny. All right. How much time we got left here on this question? About 7 seconds. Looking at, depending on which platform you're on, but on YouTube, that's about the delay. So, okay. So the answer is to create shadows. It's called a cucalorius or a cookie. It's it's used a lot in film, and I know when I show you this picture, you guys are going to recognize this. So whoops, the wrong one. So what it does is it's a piece of metal usually, and it goes in front of the fixture, and it projects a pattern of light. And it can, when anytime you see a movie and it looks like there's light coming in through a window and you see the frame of the window, it's not a window, it's a cookie, or cucalorius, they call it. So, or when there's leaves moving on the background, behind the subject, usually on the wall or something, that's done with this device. So I know you've seen, now you're going to see it everywhere you start looking at TV, but it's definitely very common, and it's very handy as well, because instead of taking a window frame and shooting light through it, you can just put one of these cookies in front of the light, and it projects it. Yes, Dean, you're right. That's an interesting point Dean makes, and I almost brought this up, but Dean says it's kind of like a gobo, and I'll be honest with you, that's what I thought as well. But when I looked up gobo, because that's what I usually call them, I think there's a little bit of difference. I tried to figure out exactly, come up with a better definition of the difference between a gobo and a cucalorius, and I think the difference is primarily that a gobo is smaller, and it's more like if you're going to project a logo or something behind somebody, or something else. But I know there's definitely a lot of them out there, and there's two different standards of sizes for these gobos that drop in. But they're very, very similar. And I think gobos are also maybe can be color, like they can create a colored pattern as well. But anyway, I associate the two together as well. So I'm sure some crew member on a film would correct me if I use the term gobo, but that's what I thought as well. That's what I call them, as a gobo. But apparently there's a little bit of a difference there. So anyway, good point on that one. So now you guys know if you're okay. So now Kenda says her logic: the more cookies I eat, the fatter I get, the larger my shadow. Hey, let me tell you, I like some cookies as well. And ice cream too. I'll share a secret with you guys. Sometimes after the show, I have a celebratory bowl of ice cream. If it's a good show, I feel like, okay, I deserve it. Anyway, not that means anything, or you guys care about that. And and Junaid says he's learned another new a new cuckoo thing to learn. Okay. Yep, and that's right, Sue Ann. Food and Eastman go together, at least in my and your experience. So, all right, you guys are great. I love this. Okay. Hey, see, I'm having all kinds of fun here. I hope you guys are. Okay. All right. So a cucalorius or a cookie is used to create shadows or patterns on the wall. All right. So let's go to the next one. The next one is when shooting. Now, you guys should know this now. When shooting outdoors, why would your images turn blue? All right, because we've sort of covered this in a previous question. And that is that the ISO is too high, that it's underexposed, your camera is set to tungsten white balance, or you're shooting on sRGB. So if you're shooting outdoors, why would your images turn out blue? Too high ISO, underexposed, set to tungsten, or shooting on sRGB. Whoops. Sorry. Hit the wrong button here. Too many buttons. It's blue hour. It's interesting you say that, because I almost did a question on Blue Hour, Judy. Um, so, and of course, for those of you that want to know, Blue Hour is before sunrise, right before sunrise. So, I'm not sure I understand some of you guys' answers here. So, so, um, I think Dean says. So Dean says he thinks it's C, and Tony says Blue Hour as well. Allie says it's C, and Junaid loves Blue Hour, which is really, really beautiful time of day. You know, I love mornings and sunrises. They're so great. I just wish they didn't come so early in the day. Um, and all right, so now Judy's buying vowels as well. Okay. There are no wise, Tony. Sorry, only wise guys. Um, all right, and she learned last night golden hour. All right, well, you guys are going to be disappointed then when you learn the answer because it's none of those. Well, it is some of those. It's really when it's set to tungsten. So I should have mentioned this on my previous one, so I'm gonna go back a little bit here. So let me show you an answer. Let me hang on. So here's forgot to mention this on this photo right here. So this is a photo I took, and there was not much of a background. I was looking for a background. I couldn't find anything interesting. So what I did is I put this guy against this window. It was in an office building in D.C. And what I did is I turned the camera purposely to tungsten. Now, when you do that, because of the daylight, it turns everything blue. The guy was blue, the background was blue, but then what I did is I took and put a gel over the flash, which was daylight, because it would have been blue as well, because of the color balance or white balance being on tungsten, and that converted the daylight strobe to tungsten. So he came out properly with the right color temperature. But the background was still blue. It's a really good technique you can use sometime if you want to kind of make something a little more interesting. Sometimes you have to punch it up with a little bit of Photoshop or Lightroom to kind of get the vibrant color. But that's what's happening here. That blue is based on the fact that the white balance was set to tungsten. Now, so here's the real answer, but I meant to mention that to you before to kind of give you a hint on this. So yeah, so if you're outdoors and you're on a tungsten white balance, then your pictures are going to be blue. Just like if you're on daylight, or I guess it would be daylight indoors, they're going to be really, really orange. So, in fact, one technique you can use, just to kind of give you a hint here, if you're shooting outdoors and you want to, and you're doing portraits, if you'll take your white balance and bump it up to cloudy, what you'll find is it'll warm up the skin tones a little bit. It's not enough. Shade can be a little too much, but cloudy will just give you a little bit of warmth in the skin tones. Now, obviously, if you're shooting on RAW, you can change this, but I found that many times I won't need to touch it once I've shot on cloudy. So, just, all right. So, the answer then is because the camera was set to tungsten white balance. Okay. So, the next one is what is an egg crate used in photography? Is it used to prop up a stand or stand on? I guess you could call this. Is it another name for what's called an apple box? Or is it another name for a grid to focus light? Or does it reduce camera noise on a movie set? It's also that is also can be referred to as a blimp, by the way, for the D. So A, is it used to prop up or stand on? B, another name for a wooden apple box. C, another name for a grid to focus light. Or D, is it reduced camera noise for the shutter of a camera when used on a camera set? Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. All right, you guys. All right. Great answers, by the way. Light diffuser, you think? Okay. All right. So are we out of time? Yeah. So the answer is on this one. It is C. It's a name for a grid to focus light. So let's see. And it looks something like this. They're usually a square, a rectangle, and they Velcro on the front, depending on how they're set up. And it alters the shape or the intensity of the light. Now, I'm actually, see if I can show you guys here. Where is my, oh. So I actually have one right here. Okay, I don't know if you can see it. And I have a picture of it right here. I took a picture for you guys. And it's, I call them grids, but they're also called egg crates. Now, the reason for using that and why I use it is because it allows the light to, there's a couple things it does. Number one, it softens the edges of the light, but more importantly, it keeps the light going in a straight direction. In other words, even though there's a softbox I'm using, the light doesn't spread out. And the reason for me, the reason I do it is because I want to keep the light from falling onto the background. With just the softbox, the light spreads out a little too much, and it washes. It's not a lot, but I'm picky when it comes to lighting. But it washes out a little bit of the back. It falls on the background and washes out a little bit of the blue LED lighting in the background. So I use the grid to direct the light a little more straight on, so therefore it doesn't fall in the background. So that is the purpose for a grid or a egg crate. Okay. Yeah, you like so. So anyway, so Junaid says he likes this. Thanks, Junaid. And yep, a little BTS there. I was trying to. It's not easy to see up there, but anyway, so I have that light there. So my key light. And then I have another one here, which is a softbox, which does not have a grid on it, which is kind of angled in a little bit so it doesn't fall in the background. So anyway. Okay. So good answers, guys. Good one on that one. And you guys got close, even though you weren't totally, on some of them you were not exactly sure, but you knew it was a lighting tool to direct light, and that's the key. You can also find you'll find them sometimes called a grid. See if I have one here somewhere. I know I do. Hang on. You'll also see them. They go in like this. And these will go into a light fixture, and they'll. So I think what you'll find is they call those the fabric ones egg crates, and these are referred more to as grids. Okay, and this one, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but see how it's got some holes in it, and it directs the light. And the other thing is they're rated. Now generally the ones that come on soft boxes and things like that there's no rating on them. They're just egg crates, and the spacing is about the same. But when you're talking about a grid, they come in different hole sizes. This one's a 20-degree one, and so you can see the holes are pretty narrow, and so it's really going to give you a very narrow amount of light, or light in a very narrow direction. But I have these in 20, 30, 40, and 60. And depending on what kind of light I need, how far I want the light to spread, would determine which one of these I would use. So this is typically referred to as a grid, and the Egg crate can also be considered a grid, but it also primarily refers to, when they talk about egg crate, this would generally not be called an egg crate. It would be called a grid. But the fabric ones are definitely called egg crates. So. Dean asked if it's like it's a great question, Dean. Thank you. Dean asks, is it like an ND filter rating? No. There you will. By the way, you will lose some light loss to it, but it's not a whole lot. But you will lose some. But it's really more of a way to direct the light so it doesn't spill over anywhere. So if you wanted a light to just kind of shine right on a person, you'd use a grid, and it's going to kind of keep that light off the background. It's going to be more of a spotlight. So if you used if you use what's called a snoot, again, I have one here somewhere. If you use what's called a snoot, it's a round device and it directs the light in a very narrow pattern. But the problem is the edges are very defined and kind of harsh looking. But this doesn't do that. This is a real soft edge, which is a little nicer. And it's also not quite as narrow. So a snoot is just going to be, boom, the light's going to be very, very narrow in one place. This will give you a little more spread. So the reason it's in degrees, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, is the angle that the light will spread out to. So it's not really an ND kind of a thing, where a neutral density filter is going to be something that's really going to block the light or lower the light. So what we would use an ND for, two applications really primarily. Neutral density filter, you guys are wondering what that is. A neutral density filter would be used if you want to use a slow shutter speed in the middle of the day or outdoor when you have a lot of light. If you watched last week, this is the problem I was having. I was shooting on ISO 32. My camera goes down to 32, and f16 or f22, and I still had a little too much light. So I couldn't slow the thing down any slower to get a blur. So if you want to do water, well, an ND filter will block the light completely up to 10 stops generally, and allow you to then use a slower shutter speed. The other application is the opposite. It's not a shutter speed issue. What if you wanted to shoot wide open? You want to do a portrait outside, you want to shoot at 2.8, for example. You couldn't, because even if you're shooting at 8,000th of a second at ISO 100, you're still going to have too much light. Well, an ND filter would let you block some of that light and allow you to shoot wide open. So, okay, that's the deal on that. So hope that helps. And Junaid asks, is an ND filter only used on the camera? Actually, they make ND filters or sheets of ND material that you can put over a light. So yes, you can block light just by using this polarizing, and or some of them are polarizing, some of them are ND sheets, and they'll have blocks of light. You can stop a couple of, 2-3 stops probably. I don't know if you can, but you can put them together, of course, right? So if you need more, you can put more than one sheet on there. But for a camera, generally what will go on the lens will be up to 10 stops. Well, that's interesting. Okay. So, all right. Yes, that's correct. They do make, and sometimes you'll put some stuff on there that will block on the windows as well. That's exactly good point, a great point for that. So, okay. All right. Let's see what our next one is here. The next one is, which of these do not refer to camera sensor technology? This is a little bit of a tricky question here. So, kind of a trick question. But A would be CMOS, B would be CCD, C would be micro four thirds, or D would be depth of field, or DOF. So which of these do not refer to a camera sensor technology? CMOS, CCD, micro four thirds, or depth of field? So see if you guys get this. How much we got? About 15 seconds left on this one. So Dean says D. Anybody else have any answers on this? Which of these do not refer to camera sensor? Allie says D. Okay, give you guys a few more seconds. See if we got any more answers here. No, we can't buy any vowels on this one. Sorry. All right, so the answer on this one is D. You guys are right. See, I knew you're smart. I knew you guys pick this up. So what happens on this is that, oh, wow, look, there's a picture from Allie. Look at that. Hope she didn't mind that I used her photo. So there's, yes, that's correct, Janae. It's a lens function. So a CCD is called a charged coupled device. They're typically, you're going to find CCDs used on older, they've kind of now done CMOS, but primarily medium format cameras and on security cameras use CCD technology. CMOS is pretty much all now DSLRs or CMOS, use CMOS, and the reason is because they're typically, they are more sensitive to light than CCDs are, and so anyway, so they're just, I wasn't going to go into all the details, but Micro Four Thirds is just a smaller sensor. It's a full frame or an APS-C sensor. Is a full frame size. The next size down would be APS-C, and the next one would be a Micro Four Thirds. And I have a number of full frame and Micro Four Thirds cameras. My Micro Four Thirds are Panasonics, and I primarily use them for video. So the image on the right is a photo, a macro photo that Allie shot, and it is a good example of depth of field or shallow depth of field. So I figured I would use that as a, show you guys what's going on there. Okay. So let's see what else we got here. All right, so good going on that one. I knew I couldn't snake you guys on that one. You'd get it. Okay. This will, is that the last one? Yeah, I guess it is. Okay. This is kind of a bonus question I threw in here. All right. So what famous photographer or industry person made this quote? A portrait is not made in the camera, but on either side of it. So did Sally Mann make that quote? Was that her quote? B, Edward Steichen. C, Ansel Adams. Or D, Eastman Kodak. Or Kodak, I guess George Eastman would be his name, correct name, right? So A, Sally Mann. B, Edward Steichen. I think it's Steichen. I may get it wrong. C, Ansel Adams, or D, George Eastman. You guys are too much. So I don't, Judy's making up her own categories now. She says it's G. Okay. I guess that works. If you don't like the rules, make up your own, right? Okay. So time's up on that one, and Allie's guessing D. That's a good guess, Allie. I'll tell you the other answer another great answer would be C, is Ansel Adams, because he said something very similar, but the correct answer is Edward Steichen. But Ansel Adams, I'm often quoted, I use his quote all the time, and he says there's two people in every photo, the person in front of the camera and the person behind it. He also has something that says something about, a quote about the most important thing about the distance in photography is the 12 inches behind the camera, meaning it's all about us. And that's really what they're both trying to get at. But he was a very, very well-known American photographer, and just around the same time as Ansel Adams, in fact. So they probably knew each other, I believe. But this is a photo of Fred Astaire. I don't know if you guys know who that is or not. He was a famous dancer in a lot of movies. But the point of all of this is that it's really about you. You're the one that makes that image. You're the one that makes that portrait. It's not necessary. I mean, obviously the person's important that's in front of the lens, but you're going to, if you can see here, he's taken this person and used a shadow to kind of accentuate, two shadows to kind of accentuate the portrait. And so this came out of his head, right? His concept. So he's the one that made the portrait, not necessarily Fred Astaire. While Fred Astaire is the subject and had a big part in it, it's really the photographer's vision that creates that. Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, that's cool. So Dean knows that quote, and yeah. So some pretty cool movies, Fred Astaire. Dancing on the Ceiling is the one I can think of. Of course, that song is not Fred Astaire, but it's gone blank on the guy's name now. A modern artist. Anyway, sorry. All right. So, a couple things I want to remind you guys of. Again, we talked about this before. But don't forget that the first Friday of the month is photo reviews, so that you guys want to submit your work, have me look at it and give you some feedback on it. It's not whether I like the work or not. It's all based on the artistic side of the image, how it works artistically and technically. In fact, I'll give you a little sneak peek here. Here's some of the things that I use to judge the images are the 7 common rules of art or design: line, shape, form, space, texture, value, color. Of course, the composition rule of thirds, and also the golden ratio. So, but anyway, so yeah, hey, I'd love to have you join us to have your work submitted at first Friday of every month. You can submit at any time. You don't have to wait till that week or that day. You can do it right now if you want to. The other one is that if you're into social media stuff, be sure and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, obviously. YouTube. It'd be really nice if you guys would like or subscribe to the channel. That'd be on the YouTube channel. Appreciate that. Or Instagram or Twitter, of course. Kind of keep up with stuff all week, trying to keep things going on with you guys, show you what we're up to, what's happening, and things that are not just happening with us, but also with the industry. And if you're interested, we also have a Facebook group you guys can join. It's a little different, I think, than most Facebook groups. Try not to do too much of the... try and make it more educational, I guess, is the way, and really kind of comment more and give you guys a little bit more guidance on your work. So, anyway. But anyway, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I had a lot of fun. You guys are great. Thanks. You guys really kept me entertained. Thanks. That was hilarious. But we'll see you next week. Again, let's see. Next week is the 4th Friday of the month. I don't know what we're doing next week. I forget. So anyway, every Friday, 9 o'clock. Again, don't forget, 9 p.m. Eastern. Love to have you join us or on the replay. And again, if you find this useful, please share this with your friends or on other groups or places that you think people might benefit. But anyway, have a great weekend. And remember, no matter what lens you have on your camera, it's going to be the wrong one.